Hey pals and gals, it's Jera with the new phone, so this is probably the clearest it's ever gonna look right now for the moment, and we are doing September questions and answers for Patreon. Yay! Let's start off. From my sister. This one is the rudest one, so we'll go with her first. She's aware of my producing stress, which is causing these cute little bags under my eyes, as you can see. Because I realize that producing a show costs thousands and thousands of dollars when you are trying to do it for more than one show. And she says, why don't you just sell your sperm to raise money for King of the Hobos? She mentions this because it's an inside joke in our family, because my father, who has tons of crazy stories, some of which I cannot tell until at least one or two parties are dead, actually, before I was born, did sell sperm in college to make money. The reason I'm not going to sell sperm, Jelena, is that one, nobody wants my sperm. Nobody. Nobody wants it for freebies. Nobody wants it for paysies. Number two, I just don't want any of me around. I mean, I don't think that would be an ethically good thing to do at the moment, or maybe at all. I don't think it's even my type they want in the sperm market. They tend to want, like, healthy people. But good question, Jelena. Lisa Kim asks, favorite pizza in New York City? I think she asked this before, but I'll answer it differently. My favorite one close by. If you're going for pizza and you're in a bind, always go with a coal-burning oven versus like natural gas or whatnot when it comes to New York pizza. And if you're in a pinch, go with a place that sells it by the whole pie versus a slice, because that's usually the better places. If you can't do that and you have to go with the slice, then go with your coal-burning places. There's a place nearby where I live called Grandpa's, which has a really, not bad coal-burning oven, and it's always a good slice if you're, on the way home. Lisa asks, what have you learned as an actor-performer in New York City? I've learned this. It's better to do one show well a year than 6 mediocre shows. Because in my 20s, and even in the first couple years here, I was just obsessed with doing as much as I could. And so I would just do back-to-back shows, and they would be of varying levels of quality. Most of them would be, lack of stage managers, loosely held together, rehearsals in less than stellar places, and I learned that wears you out after a while. And after a while, the years pile up and you start to ask yourself, what are you doing? What is the point of this? It's better to do one really well-crafted show a year, or project a year, than a bunch of projects that just ultimately eat you up. And I've also learned that it doesn't matter if you're good at something. You have to be known for it. You can't just be a really good playwright, or a really good actor, or a really good dialectician. People have to know that you can do this stuff. And the way you do it is, and it's such a gross word I vomit every time I say it, is you have to market and brand yourself, but in very open and subtle ways. In ways that, friends know you write plays. If friends know you write plays or write solo shows, I'll give you an example. There's this new friend of mine I'm making in this show. We're doing a street theater version of Romeo and Juliet. He's a playwright. I know he's a playwright, so if I ever want to, think about doing some unconventional plays, I'm going to think about him. And likewise, he knows I'm a playwright because he knows about my hobo show, and his friend asked, hey, does this hobo show have a director? And I said, well, it does. Abigail's been doing it since the inception, and she's the best. But there is a production that may need a director, and I've got a script for it. And that's how it works. I mean, that's really another thing I've learned in the city, is that you have to be known. It's not enough for you just to make your stuff. You have to be open and agreeable and gently make yourself known in order for that stuff to get done. My mother asks, how did the Hobo musical come about? about 2012, I was just brainstorming about essentially American history, the decline of a specific subset of culture of transient workers around the time of the Great Depression. And I started thinking about my mother, my grandmother's stories of coming here from Mexico and working in the fields, their campesino stories, and also reading about campesino culture as well. And I really wanted to deconstruct the essential narrative of what hobos have become, because even by 1930, where the show takes place, hobos are regarded as a joke. And you see in Sullivan's Travels, Charlie Chaplin's Little Tramp, and it was disheartening even to those extant in the dying culture. And I've always been a fan of people who are just holding on in a dying culture. A lot of my plays deal with that. The Black Plague play, This Great Mortality is what it's called, Ghost on a Stick, a man trapped in a culture of this death and insanity and mental illness, struggling to find his own identity. And like King of the Hobos, where Gilly himself grew up with this hobo culture, but everyone around him, including his mentor, has died or moved on, and he has all this history and knowledge, but nobody to share it with. And that fascinates me, because that's been a cycle told time and time and time again. And the courage and the bravery and the sadness that it takes for people to lose a culture and to make a new one out of salvage pieces is something that Americans and people the world over continue to do. Meredith asks, advice to young artists. I'll give this advice to old artists too. Feed yourself with what you do. I'm gonna say it to me too. Feed yourself with what you do. Don't expect others to be the altar of your esteem. I know, I say that and it's so goddamn hard, but there's many times where we make stuff and we think, wow, if this ineffable person who has power or perhaps ability to love us will appreciate it, we will become valuable or more profitable or finally become successful. No. We are making things before those precepts occur. We are making them for the mere act of making and because they feed us. Because if we didn't make them at all, we would not be. Feed yourself first. Meredith also asks, causes most passionate about and why? I mean, I could go on with a bunch of them, but primarily they deal down to, in a general sense, authentic stories being told by voices often kept silent or misrepresented. I think often of my father. I think how he had a bunch of stories that he always wanted to tell, but he felt embarrassed or shy because he felt he didn't have the words or the correct education to represent his life. And he attempted to write an autobiographical account, but he was very shy about it because, he really had a, associate's level education, and I think that stops a lot of people. I think there's a lot of stories that are often ignored or only told from a limited point of view because people are afraid based on their limited language or afraid on how others might make fun of how they say their story. My questions for you this month. Number 1. It's the end of your life, and you know it for some reason. If you could leave a gift or a present for death, what would it be and why? Number 2. When's the last time you remember counting backwards to displace yourself? And what was the reason?